I still remember this call. It happened a couple of years ago. I was the engineer supporting a gas plant, and they called me up saying, "Hey, Steven, can we start this thing up?" The thing was, we had just gotten the results back to a flare study that showed the majority of the devices were designed wrong, frankly, and it had at least $500,000 worth of upgrades in order to fix those issues. And so there they were, ready to hit the green go button, but the facility had material defects. And so I was put in the unsavory position to say, no, you can't start it up. It's not ready. And the challenge with that was, and why I was in such a tight spot, was because the operations team had been under pressure for a long time to get this plant ready to start up. And before they had asked me, and before they asked all the stakeholders who normally sign off on a plant starting up, like the people who you would think take part in like the pre-startup safety review or the management of change process, or the process hazard analysis, all that stuff. There's kind of a group of people that typically participate in that, like engineering, mechanic, I&E, some form of management, like the plant manager, the area manager, something like that. You have this core group that is part of those discussions. Well, I had been left out on a couple of those checkpoints to the point where they were unaware that there was $500,000 worth of essentially warranty work that needed to be done on this plant before it could be operational. Like technically you could flow gas through it, but on paper it wasn't compliant. They hadn't followed the process safety information guidelines and company program to make sure that we were in PSM compliance. And it's more than just this compliance piece. It's more than just pencil whipping, right? It's like there's actually stuff that's wrong with the facility, and maybe you could flow gas through it today and it'd be just fine and nothing would happen, but maybe not, right? And as we know, hope is not a tactic, right? You can't get to a spot where I'm comfortable signing off on starting a facility when you know that there's material issues with it. So the challenge, why I was such an awkward spot, is because there are members of the operations team that are already committed to the senior executives that we would have it started by a certain day. And so the executives had already communicated things to the stakeholders, and everyone had this expectation that we were going to start it. And so I'm put in this tight spot where I have to say, I get it. I get you're excited. In fact, I feel the pressure. I'm feeling the heat right now, but for me to sign off on it would be dishonest, and I'm not willing to do that. And so I had to draw the line in the sand, and it didn't make me a popular person, but I felt like, to be a person of integrity, to live out that aspect, I had to say, sorry, we can't start this up. And looking back on it now, it's interesting because, like, of course I feel like I made the right decision, but in that moment I wanted to say yes. I had the internal conflict. I wanted to say yes. And so the thing is why did this happen? Like, why did it put me in this tight spot? If the company had followed all the right checks and balances that are mandated by the process safety management program, we're talking about everything like a process hazard analysis, which would have identified this issue a long time ago, and it would have been resolved a long time ago. And if for some reason it didn't identify it during the process hazard analysis, it would have come up during the management of change process. And if for some reason it missed the management of change process, it would have come up again during the pre-startup safety review. But the thing is none of those things happened. Like, sure, there was a process hazard analysis done when the facility was first built, but it had been shut down for some time, and so it was due for another. And it had been shut down for a while, so it was due for a pre-startup safety review. Sometimes, like, we just assume, hey, look, we just shut the unit down and we left it down for a year, and so if we didn't change anything, is that okay? Are we good? I mean, well, first, according to PSM, you're not good. You need to do a PSSR. And one of the reasons why that's important is because usually there have been changes that you're not aware of. Like during that year that it's down, did anyone, move some equipment out of service or borrow equipment from one area to use it in equipment that's in service? Any number of changes. But because the ops team didn't follow that process, an issue went unnoticed through many of the checkpoints until finally it was down to, they were ready to start it up, and one person, me, was put in this awful situation where I had to say, like, no, I'm sorry, I just can't. I can't wrap my head around this. And so why do we do that? This, by the way, my story is not unique. This happens every day. And you're put in that tight spot where you're like, I don't want to be the guy. Like, I would love to blend in right now and just be part of the team and say, let's start this thing up and let's give everyone what they want. And so people are put in that spot every single day. And why? Because process safety management is, this OSHA regulation, that it became big and complicated because it was first developed and adopted by like big companies like Dow and Union Carbide, Exxon Mobil, and people that had a lot of headcount, like a lot of people on their PSM teams. They had a lot of money that they could fund a lot of software and stuff like that. But to the small to mid cap operators who try to be really lean, it's like it's this big cumbersome thing that is hard for people to wrap their head around, and it frankly like gets in their way. Or like there's this kind of feeling like, it's slowing us down, or it's and sometimes it's like the feeling that everything's fine, but we have to go through this kind of annoying pencil whipping exercise of process hazard analysis or PSSR or something like that. And so like there's some resistance to adopting that. The reality of it is PSM doesn't have to be complicated. It's only complicated because like people haven't put in the energy to demystify it, right? So that's why we started Petronas. Like we said, there's not a champion of PSM for the small and mid cap operators. There just isn't. And so we said we're gonna redesign how PSM gets implemented so that small and mid cap operators can be 100% compliant. They can discover and be aware and implement some of the best software tools, some of which have free versions, some of which have low cost versions that are really tailored for the small to mid cap operator. So that it just streamlines all that stuff. It streamlines your MOC, it streamlines your PSSR. Like we geek out about this every single day because I don't want other people to have to be in that spot. I want like PSM to be clearly understood at every level, to not weigh people down, right? My quest and Petronas' quest is to give people wings. Give the operations team wings, not weights. Use process safety as a way to execute your projects faster. What? Faster? Yeah, you heard me right. Execute your projects faster, 100% compliant, and in a way that people want to uncover issues early on because they have this confidence that when they do, it'll be handled quickly. It'll be handled in a way that people aren't chasing paper all over the place and stashing different versions of the same document at different places. Like there's a really intuitive, intelligent way to approach PSM that lets you operate efficiently and quickly, and that's what we've discovered. And so we came up with this framework to help people implement those into their teams. We've shared some of those insights in the free PSM masterclass, which we recently released. Super excited. But then there was such a response that said we need more of this, so we developed a full masterclass to help on the training side, and we've helped build out some tools to make it easier for the ops team to really drop the weights and just get back to what you do best, which is operate. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to my story. And go out there, be safe, go crush it. Remember, awesome is always an option. I'll catch you on the flip side.